I definitely, after the last video, I'm like, this is a problem. Like, you should be in panic mode. We have a real problem on our hands. Big decisions in Ranger Town. They have $11 million to spend this summer, which means, who do they trade? Welcome back to EDI Sports Cards. In this episode, we're going to explore some of the options that the New York Rangers organization has and that Chris Drury probably is looking at right now. So a lot of the stuff that was in the last video, if you saw it, about where the roster is and what's going on, and there was a lot of comments made, and I appreciate all of the comments. So there was some confusion about what's going on with the salary cap and how much room do the Rangers actually have for next year. And so I want to clear up the confusion first. So when I referenced cap friendly, that the Rangers had $1,600 left under the cap, that was for this season, and that cap ends basically June 30th. So July starts the new year, and at that point, the Rangers basically have $11 million under the cap to sign 7 different players. That's how many roster spots they have open. So they have 7 roster spots open. That's 4 forwards, 2 defensemen, and 1 backup goaltender. And so as I went through this, I wanted to make that very clear right from the beginning. So we're going to actually go over what Chris Drury can do in order to create the type of team that he needs to contend, 1, for the playoffs, but 2, for a Stanley Cup. Because as we saw the roster, and I'll show it to you again, you have 4 holes. So you got Panarin at the top with Zibanejad. Who's playing on the right wing? We have no idea. Then you've got Kreider, Hedl, and Kakko. Where's Lafreniere? Then you sign Trocheck and Gaudreau. Jimmy Vesey is on the left side on the 4th line. As everything stands right now, this is where the players are. And that's the problem, is that the player mix that they have no longer works. And it's exposed. Like, we can see that this team, as constructed, cannot win a cup. So you can't sign Tarasenko and Kane because they cost too much. You only have $11 million under the cap. So if you sign Tarasenko, you can't sign anybody else. It's over. So the Rangers have to move somebody. And the question becomes, well, who do they move? So let's look at the list of salaries that we've got. So these are the guys that are under contract. So you've got Artemi Panarin at $11.6 million. And I saw in some of the comments that people were like, well, trade Panarin. I don't think you're trading a 90-point guy. You haven't had a 90-point guy in a generation. He's your best player. I don't think you're getting rid of him. Mika Zibanejad is, like I said, I think top 5 center in the league at $8.5 million. That's what top centers get. Chris Kreider is getting 6.5. Trocheck's getting 5.6. And then you go down the list. The biggest name on here is Barclay Goodrow at $3.6 million for a 4th line center. And that's part of the problem, is that Barclay Goodrow may be overpaid as a 4th line center for the Rangers, but he might be a big deal for another team because a $3.6 million cap hit for a guy who's already won 2 cups, helped the Rangers to get the Stanley Cup Finals last year, and is a grit player, and he's a center. He could be a 2nd or 3rd line center on any other team. He's not a 1st line center, but he could be a 2nd or 3rd line center. So for $3.6 million, he's actually a bargain, especially if he slots into your 2nd line. He's a huge bargain. So Chris Drury might be able to move Barclay Goodrow, but let's look at what Drury has to do this offseason. So he's got Lafreniere open. He's got Keandre Miller open. Those are both RFAs. He needs to have some idea of what he's going to do with them. He's got to sign those guys. Now, when we look at the roster again, so who's open? So we need a left winger for the 3rd line. We need a right winger for the 1st line, 3rd line, and 4th line. And so there's a lot of openings. It's not going to work. So what happens if we start looking at Barclay Goodrow and Chris Kreider And yeah, you see in the roster spot, so you move Kreider, you move Barkley, and so how much cap space does that create? Well, there you go. That creates $10.1 million in cap space for 2 roster spots, and that leaves room to sign Tarasenko. Now, let me show you what it looks like when you sign Tarasenko on the ice. Here you go. Put Tarasenko on the top line, and now you got Panarin, Zibanejad, and Tarasenko. That's a number 1 line. And now look at the second line is your kid line. So it's Lafreniere, Hedl, and Kakko. You now have 2 legit superstar lines. And then the third line, you move Jimmy VZ up to play with Trocheck. And now you bring in your young guys, or your, I guess, less experienced guys, because Brodzinski's already in his 30s. So Brodzinski plays right wing on the third line. Othman comes in to play left wing on the fourth line. You're still missing a center, but now you have Ryan Carpenter slotting in on the fourth line. And what that does is, as you fill the holes, so take a look at this when you fill the holes. You've got Jimmy VZ at $800,000. Brennan Othman will make $800,000. Brodzinski will make $800,000, and Ryan Carpenter will make $800,000. So you're spending a total of $3.2 million for 4 roster spots. Now you only need a 4th line center. So here's who the Rangers have in the talent lineup. So you're looking at Jake Leschyshyn, who they actually picked up on waivers in January of this year. He was a second-round pick of the Golden Knights. And Adam Sikora, who most of you don't know, he's a young kid, and he was a second-round draft pick for the Rangers last year. So if he can learn how to play center, he could possibly slot in, but he's only 19 years old, so he's got a few years to go. And if you can put Jake Leschyshyn, who already played some games for the Rangers this past season, if he's your 4th line center, maybe this is what the lineup looks like. So let's take a look. So here you go. You've got Panarin, Zibanejad, Tarasenko on the top line. You got the kid line is number 2. VZ, Trocheck, and Brodzinski is 3. And now you got Othman, Leschyshyn, and Carpenter as your 4th line. Now remember, if you're moving Gaudreau and Kreider, you're going to get something back. So now that you at least have a roster, now you can say, okay, where do I want to improve? And that's a position of strength for Drury. He can say, all right, if I'm going to move Kreider and Gaudreau, that shores up $10 million that I can use in cap space. And if I'm moving them, what do I want back? Because now this is my roster. So I know, okay, I don't have a 3rd line right winger. I need one. So if I'm going to trade Gaudreau and Kreider, I want a 3rd line right winger and a draft pick. Not that bad now. Now it becomes all right, I'm going to trade Gaudreau. Well, I want a 4th line right winger or a center or a grit guy. I need somebody on the 4th line plus a draft pick or plus 2 draft picks, because obviously that's not going to be even. So now Chris Drury can actually start to build up his own draft lottery, so to speak, of all right, you know what? Maybe I go and trade some of these players to the teams that are not as good, get their draft picks, because next year they'll have, higher draft picks. Or maybe even you can trade a Kreider in this year's draft and pick up one of the guys that you can get this year. Drury has a lot of options when he starts to look at this roster, but he needs to move Kreider and Gaudreau, and that's going to make a lot of Ranger fans really mad. And it might even make Dolan go, you're going to move Kreider? But if without Gallant, and that's the reason why I did in the last video, I showed you how well Kreider and Zibanejad did under Gallant. And I know some of you missed the point, which you're like, well, that it doesn't mean anything. The coach didn't have, it's on the player to do well. If you're going to blame the player for doing poorly, you can't then, not blame the player for doing well, and it's vice versa. No, what I was trying to show you is that under Gallant, Chris Kreider had career years. Under Gallant, Zibanejad had career years. Now, I think the upside in Zibanejad, he's still got more room to go. But I think Kreider has hit his limit. I don't think Kreider will ever score 50 goals again, ever. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not a high-quality player. And that doesn't mean that other teams that are trying to figure out, well, I need somebody on the power play, I need somebody that can penalty kill, and I need somebody that's going to score 20 to 30 goals. And for what he's getting paid, he's a bargain. And so teams are going to want Chris Kreider. But on this team, he doesn't fit anymore. He fit before, he doesn't fit now. And yes, it's a problem because it's like he is the face of the franchise, but he just doesn't fit in the scheme. Tarasenko is a way more valuable player than Chris Kreider because he's a left winger. And Lafreniere has way more upside than Kreider. Lafreniere, the sky's the limit. Like, we haven't even seen what Lafreniere can do. So would I rather keep Laf instead of Kreider? Oh, in a million years, I would take Lafreniere over Kreider. If that was even if it was a 1-to-1 trade, like, hey, another team has Lafreniere and you have Kreider and they're offering you, we'll trade you Lafreniere for Kreider. You take that in a heartbeat. So you have to look at it the same way as the Rangers, like, well, I can't keep Kreider. I got to move him. I got to move Kreider. I got to move Goudreau. And that opens up this roster to what we have. And then Drury's got to really improve in those third and fourth lines. But that's easier to do. He's got top 2 lines that could rival anybody in the league. And so is this a playoff team? I think that's the question we need to ask is this a playoff team? And so we'll look at the roster and just look at it. You got 2 lines that are amazing. So Panarin, Zibanejad, Tarasenko is an awesome first line. The kid line is a second line. They're going to get the minutes. So we'll see. Like, Lafreniere might score 30 goals. Actually, that whole line could score 30 goals each. So what if? This is what it comes down to. So these are the 7 things that need to happen for the Rangers to make the playoffs. I don't know if they can contend for a cup. The roster, as I just showed you, is not a cup contender. It's a playoff team, but it's not a cup contender. Drury's got to do what he does. He's got to make the magic happen and try to figure out, how do I take it from a playoff team to a cup contender? But it's a much better lineup with those moves than what he's got right now. So here are the 7 things that the Rangers need to do. So the first is that if Panarin gets 90 points, Zibanejad gets 90 points, and Tarasenko gets 90 points, well, I'm telling you right now, that is the best line comparable to the top line on the Oilers. 90 points for 3 guys on the same line? I mean, that's an all-star line. That's a great line. And I think with Zibanejad and Tarasenko together and putting Mika in the middle, I mean, that's a sick line. Like, seriously, that's a sick line. So now the other things that need to happen is the power play needs to improve. They need to be at 30% effective. If they can do that, I think they got a good shot. And goals against, they need to have less than 3 a game. If they can do that, this is a playoff team. Now, we'll go over Shesterkin in a second, but Shesterkin needs to improve just a little bit over this past year, so he needs to have a 2.25 goals against, and he needs to improve his save percentage to .925. Now, and Adam Fox needs to continue to just put in 80 points, and again, I don't think there's any problem with Adam Fox putting in 80 points. He's an 80-point guy. He's the best defenseman. You can't get rid of him. He's the franchise. He's the future. This is Shesterkin. So for anybody that doesn't know Shesterkin's career, so I'm going to just show you this year and what he needs to do next year. And Igor has already come out to say, you haven't seen the real Igor yet. So this is what he needs to do. And it's not that far from where he was. He just needs to improve a little bit. And this is not even, Vezina Trophy winner like numbers. This isn't his best. So he just needs to improve a little for the Rangers just to make the playoffs. In order to win a cup, yeah, he's got to be Vezina Trophy Igor Shesterkin, like 2.07 goals against average and a .930 like save percentage. Yeah, like crazy numbers. But This is what he needs to do. So this was last year. 2.48 goals against, 9.16 save percentage, and this is what he needs to move to. A 2.25 goals against and 9.25 save percentage. So not a lot of improvement, just a little bit. So you're talking like he needs to put in a couple more games where he only allows 1 goal, and he needs to get a few more shutouts. That's it. If he can do that and not give up some of the games, like he had a couple games at the beginning of the season where he gave up like 4 or 5 goals. If he doesn't have those games at the beginning of the season, that's it. Like his goals against comes down just that much to that 2.25. The Rangers only let in less than 3 goals a game. Those 2 top lines should be able to score enough goals. And if your power play is at 30%, you're going to win 100 points. This is a 100-point team. Again, no matter who's coaching it. The problem's going to be who's the coach and what type of system do they want to play. But now they've got the players. I mean, they've got the players. That's it. So hopefully you've enjoyed this breakdown. I know for Ranger fans, they were really like, I definitely, after the last video, I'm like, this is a problem. Like, you should be in panic mode. We have a real problem on our hands. What do you do? And now that I've kind of laid out like what I think based on your comments, so I really appreciate the feedback. Some of the issues that I was having in the last video, some of the people who commented actually made some really good points. And that's where I came to these conclusions like, all right, if I was going to be the GM of this team, what moves do I need to make? And in all honesty, it looked like Goodrow is out. And then making the decision, well, do I keep Laffy or Kreider? There's no decision. I'm keeping Laffy. Kreider, you're gone. I appreciate it. You're one of the best Rangers in New York history. If you had stayed with the team, you would have your number retired. But it's not happening because your best days are gone for the Rangers. You're not going to score 50 goals again, clearly. I mean, you didn't even score 40 this year. I know it's harsh, but you didn't follow it up with a 40-goal season. So you're a 20 to 30 goal guy, a strong player, absolutely second-line left winger, and on some teams, maybe even a first-line left winger, but you're a second-line left winger. And we already have a second-line left winger, Laffy. Laffy, Hedl, Kakko. That's a great second line, backing up Panarin, Zibanejad, and Tarasenko. The Rangers got a team. That was the problem is in the last video. I didn't have Tarasenko. I didn't have Kane. But that's your right winger. That's who you need. You got to get rid of Kreider. So I know that the New York Post is covering all these stories. They do not have this. If you want to actually know what the Rangers should do, you need to follow this channel. Now, if you like sports cards as well, follow this. You just get a bonus. It's Ranger fans and sports cards, and that's the way we go. So I want to thank you for joining. This is another episode of EDI Sports Cards. Stay tuned. Please put in your comments if you want more information about the Rangers or what I think. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video.